We've kind of done some pre-assembly stuff. We've got our volute put together down here. We've got the wearing in there, and we got the spool on, and we got our float box on there. We've got our pulley put on our vacuum pump already, and we've kind of loaded the back plate. When I say loaded the back plate, we've got our lip seal in and our fittings on it. One thing that we do on the back plate is on the other side, where the stationary seat goes, is right here on this bore. We just kind of take like a little Brillo cookie and kind of polish that up, round those edges a little bit because they're kind of sharp. It's a good practice too if you're pulling a pump apart to reinstall a lip seal to clean that up, because there's always pumpage and stuff and rust on there. So it'll just help you put your pump back together a little easier. So all these parts have been washed previously. We wash everything in solvent tanks, blow it off, dry it off, make sure there's no contaminants in the bearing frame that can get in the bearings. The holes where the fittings go, we make sure those are all blown out and clean, so nothing's going to stop the flow of the grease going into the bearing. So he's going to go ahead and get started. So I'd start with your lip seals. We'll go ahead and install the lip seals and the grease fittings into the bracket and engine bracket. This particular pump is a grease pump. The lip seals will go lip out, which means the lip is going to face out of the bearings. So the smooth part's going to go in. The reason for that is because this is going to let grease seep out of this seal. That's going to keep this seal lubricated. If this was an oil-filled pump, we'd turn it over so the lip was in. That's going to hold the oil in. It's not going to let the oil come out. So on the grease-filled frame, these go what we call lip out. Use your rubber hammer. There you go. A basic seal driver tool will work. A flat piece of wood that's the same size, if that's what you got, that works too. We'll go ahead and install our grease fittings. These were oil filled. That one would get blocked off. There would be no grease going in that because only a single lip seal can go into that. This one we could put a bracket insert ring on the other side and use a double lip seal, which would be both lip out on both sides. So you could still grease your lip seals, but the inner seal would hold the oil in. So that one would still get a grease fitting if it was oil filled, but this one's grease, so we just have the one lip seal on the outside. You just bill and always tell them what they're doing. Go ahead and get our plugs in. On the frame, there's two holes on the side. If it was a oil-filled pump, the top hole would get a sight glass, the bottom hole would get a plug. Top always gets a breather unless it's vertical, and then we plug all the holes. If this was a oil-filled Redi-Prime, the hole where the sight glass would be would have a T coming out with an elbow and a 2-inch pipe nipple sticking up so you guys could fill the frame with oil because you couldn't get to the top because of the Redi-Prime table. Hand me this other bearing. He's got his first bearing heated up. It's going to end up going on that shaft, so Mike, when he goes to pull that bearing off, you'll have to step back. We've got some questions today about these back bearings, the double bearing pumps, and some guys are saying back-to-back, face-to-face. The big part of this bearing needs to go onto the shoulder of the shaft. So with that shaft, the way it is in that chain vise, it's going to slide on this way. You want the big shoulder to hit that shoulder, and then the lock nut needs to hit this part. If you look at this side, you can see the cage where the bearings are in, and it's way thinner. So these need to be face-to-face on the shaft, which is also, it's back-to-back, not face-to-face, excuse me. So as long as you get your shoulders lined up with the shoulders on the shaft and the lock nut, you'll be good. What happens if you put those on backwards, you won't get your bearings tight. What that'll cause is you'll get vibration up and down, and you won't be able to shim your frame correctly. So. He's going to put some grease in the back side of the bearing, and we're going to go ahead and install the front bearing or wet end bearing into the frame. You just lightly tapped it around the bearing to get it to slide in there. Never want to beat on the inner race too bad. It can cause that bearing to flex and wreck the cage. We use a press plate to install our bearings. In that book, there should be a print on those. If there's not, there should be. On the F-18s, there's a 20 thousandths raised part where the bearing's going to hit. You need that 20 thousandths because you need to shove that front bearing in a little bit further than just flat. If you don't shove that in further, when you go to shove your shaft forward to shim your frame, what can happen is you're not going to get your shimming correct when you take your measurement from here to here. We'll show you that measurement when he gets the shaft in there. But that can cause improper shimming of your frame, and your bearings are going to wear a lot faster because you're going to be capturing that bearing with this bracket. If there's any questions along this, raise your hand. Don't hesitate. Yes, sir.
He has a question. This is the shaft, the bearing, and this is the box.
Yeah.
He wants to know what is the tolerance in this case when the gearbox is used and we replace the bearings.
I don't know that tolerance. If you get a print,
Okay.
you can mic it out and see what it should be.
Okay.
I can figure it out. I can have one of the engineers. There's a couple engineers sitting right over here. Those guys can figure that out for you. Nothing. He was asking about the tolerance between the outside of the bearing race and the inside diameter of the bearing frame, how much that's supposed to be. And I didn't have an answer for him, so we'll have to figure that out for him.
Get that answer for you, but I don't know about that.
So when you put your bearing on there, you want to hold it up against that shaft, like he's doing right there, until it cools down. You want that inner race to lock on the shaft. If it doesn't lock on the shaft, what can happen is if you let go, that bearing can slide back a little bit. And if it slides back a little bit, you're not going to have a proper shimming because you're not going to have your bearings all the way on. At this point, we can go ahead and put grease in the back bearing. We grease all the bearings up, a lot of grease. That way they're ready to go. We don't sit there and pump grease into the fittings forever and wait for the grease to get in there. You put grease on that. Huh? Says who? Oh, well. Come on, man. You guys got any questions about anything so far? Yes, ma'am. How many employees? Not sure. Over 100. She asked how many employees we had here, and I don't have an exact number. I think it's somewhere close to 110, 115 people. 150? About 150 now. We work 2 shifts in assembly. We have a day shift and a swing shift. The machine shop also has 2 shifts. Should be good. Don't hang it up. Don't hang it up. Okay. You guys might notice on some of the newer Cornell pumps built in recent months, we've switched our backplate lip seal to a cassette style seal versus the double KOK lip seal. So what that did was it reduced chroming of our shafts, save a little bit of cost there, and it's a better seal.
Mark, from the audience, you might know that question. Mark, one of our engineers, from the audience.
Oh, okay.
This is a new design of lip seal?
New design, yeah.
Yeah.
So one of the engineer guys can correct me if I'm wrong here, but the cassette style seal, if you guys aren't familiar with it, there's a rubber ring in here, and that's what locks on the shaft. So it spins this seal with the shaft. And it seals actually on the inside of the casing of the lip seal. Okay, so that one he's going to hold it on there for a second. Next thing that will go on is the lock washer. It's got a tang in here in the end of the shaft. The tang on the inside is going to slide right into that. And then we use anti-seize, of course. Then he'll go ahead and put his lock nut on. Then when you tighten that, you want to tighten it up till it's tight. There's 4 notches on the lock nut, and that lock washer has those little tangs all around it. So when you get it tight, you want to know that you can put one of those tangs in those slots on the lock washer. That way it'll hang. Hang it up, can't come loose. Need a chisel. Then you want to bend that tang into that notch. So after you tighten that, if you think you got them tight enough, I don't have gloves on, you want to grab these 2 bearings and you want to try to spin them opposite. You want to make sure they're pretty tight. When they're still warm, they're still kind of oily, they might spin a little bit, but what you're checking for when you do that is you want to make sure they're not wobbling around a lot. If they're wobbling around or not, you're probably not tight enough. And if it feels like it keeps getting tighter, you probably didn't get your back bearing on all the way. But if you tighten down that nut, if it's just a little bit, you can get it on there. But if it's too much, go ahead and flip your shaft over in your press, and you can press that on the rest of the way, and you can finish tightening up your lock nut. We're going to go ahead and drop the shaft into the bearing frame, and then we're going to take the bearing frame over to the press behind Michael there, and we're going to press it in there until it stops. Don't hit the TV. I'll let you move over there if you need to, Michael. Okay. So since this shaft has a lock nut on it, we don't need to put a pressing arbor over the shaft onto the inner race of the bearings to press it on there. What I mean by that is that lock nut's holding that bearing on there. So you can press on the shaft itself to push the bearing and shaft assembly into the bearing frame. If you had a single bearing, you'd want to put something over the top of the end of the shaft that's going to slide down and rest on the inner bearing race. So you're pushing on the that inner race that's on the shoulder of the shaft. So you're essentially pushing on the shaft. What can happen is if you just push on the shaft without a lock nut on there, you can push that back bearing off the shaft. And then you got to reheat your bearing and start over. We shouldn't have to go over there again, so it should be good. We'll go ahead and pull our press plate back off. Grease this side of the bearing this time. We'll put some grease in the register of the back plate or the bracket. And then we wipe a little bit of that grease on the lip seals to help that slide on to the shaft, and also so it has some lubrication properties on startup. You guys got any questions about how the shaft went into the bearing frame or anything like that? Now he's going to go ahead and stand that frame back up and drop that shaft down in that hole again. And then we're going to take our measurement to figure out how many shims we need to put in here. On double bearing F18 pumps, our shimming tolerances are 2 to 7 thousandths. So where we're going to take our measurement from is we're going to measure the depth of the race of the bearing to the face of the here on the frame, and then we're going to measure the depth of where the bracket's going to land on the face to the depth of which this register is going to write on that bearing. So when you take your measurement, you want to subtract those two numbers from each other. Which he's right at 7, he's on the high. I like to go to the low, so I'd put a 5 thousandth shim in that to get it down to 2 thousandths. Is there any questions on that, how that just worked? Our single bearing pumps are 7 to 12, so you take the same exact measurement, and then you want to shim to get 7 to 12 thousandths clearance. If you have too much clearance or not enough, you can heat your bearings up too much. There is a tolerance from the back vanes of the impeller to the face of the back plate. If you have too much and that shaft's moving back and forth, you can bury those back vanes into the back plate. So that tolerance is really important that you keep that. We have these nifty frame stands that we put on the pumps so we can build them horizontal. Then we can lay it back down and put our backplate impeller, vacuum pump, we can put all that stuff on horizontally instead of trying to figure out a way to rig the pump up. Yeah, you can lift by that. You'll be fine. And then when we grease our fittings from a new pump standpoint, we grease them until they kind of get a little stiff. They'll spin pretty easy without any grease in them, and then we just grease them until they start getting a little stiff, and then that's how we know how much grease. And those packets that you guys got, it tells you service hours to how many pumps of grease. So it kind of gives you guys a guideline on what your guys' grease interval should be. He's popping some Zerk caps on there right now, so when they go to paint, they don't plug those Zerks up. So earlier you guys saw us heat up a sleeve and put it on. This particular sleeve is a O-ring sleeve. So there's a little O-ring groove in there. We always blow it out, clean it out. Sometimes there's some chips in there for machining. One thing he's going to do here is he's going to knock down the edge on that shaft so we don't cut the O-ring when we set it on there. He's just using like a 3M Scotch-Brite Brillo cookie to do that. Kind of just rolling around that chamfer there to round it up. Nice and smooth, helps that O-ring slide over. We use the same oil on the O-rings to slide those on that we do the mechanical seals to install those, just that STP oil. It's engine additive, really sticky to the touch, really thick. So want to put a thin bead on there and then pop your sleeve on. You'll notice this sleeve has a notch. Has a notch on it there. You want to line that up with the keyway on this particular pump. Some models have them, some models don't. Since that sleeve isn't heated up and pressed onto the shaft, that key's going to spin that sleeve, and that's your seal's going to lock onto that sleeve, so you need that sleeve to spin. Or you need the rotating element and the seal to spin. That's what creates your sealing. So if you don't, your key's not into that notch, your sleeve's going to stay stationary and your seal's not going to seal. On these new cassette seals, you want to make sure you use some, if you're rebuilding these, you want to make sure you use something on that rubber in there that's going to evaporate. You don't want to use a lube because you want that rubber to seal onto the shaft. So if you don't use something that'll evaporate and that just, your shaft spins inside there, that seal's never going to work right for you. It's just going to leak. So what he uses like solvent, basically out of our solvent tanks. If you got like any solvent or that works pretty good. Lots of guys use that. Some guys use, a couple of guys out here using just water. So something that helps it slide on. I don't know if there's a wrong thing or a right thing. Is there anything wrong we can use on those, Jordan, besides grease? Just don't use oil or grease. I just handed him the V-ring. He forgot. That V-ring just slides onto the shaft, and then we're going to pull it up to that lip seal. That V-ring just basically to keep dust out of that lip seal.
Oh man, and it's one of those ones.
You mean to hold the pump? Get all the bolts out?
Hey, Ryan.
Didn't they? Just a second, Bill.
Oh yeah, you're gonna redo all that.
What was that?
Stromberg seal, or you're putting in a standard?
Did you call it the Stromberg seal? What did you call it? What kind of seal? It's the cassette seal.
It's that new one that has like the rubber stuff that goes over the shaft. I think it is.
Yeah. Yeah, this is the one we're using. He was asking if we were using the old style lip seal or the new style, and this is the new style one. You guys got any questions?
Best way to remove old bearings.
What's that? Removal of bearings?
Best way to remove old bearings from the shaft.
He asked what the best way to remove the bearings from the shaft is. Just press them. So just grab a couple of metal plates and stick under there. You want to make sure you're on that inner race. And just go ahead and take that lock. You want to make sure that lock nut's off or you won't get very far. And then just shove that shaft down and they'll pop off. Takes quite a bit of force to get them going sometimes, but once you get them moving, they'll come right off. So on that topic, if you were going to take this pump apart, you need to shove the shaft out this way to get it out of that front bearing. Because of the shoulders in here, you can't just slide the whole thing out and do it like that. So you'd have to take this off, take everything off, so you just have the frame with the bearing and the shaft sticking out, and then just flip it over and block this side up, and then shove on this side to get out of that front bearing, and that shaft and those two back bearings, how you get out on the vise, that's how it'll come out. Nice airline. Grab the one for the arrows. All right, so the next thing we're gonna get to here is we're gonna put the mechanical seal in. So you wanna make sure that your shaft and everything's all clean. There's no dirt, contaminants, nothing like that on there. He's starting with a clean rag to wipe stuff off instead of a dirty rag. I got it right there for you. When you take these out of the package, things can happen. You want to make sure that your O-ring on your stationary seat isn't cut. You want to look for nicks in that. You also want to look at the face, make sure it doesn't have any chips or dings or cuts or scrapes or anything on it. Stuff can happen in shipping, and we do get some sometimes, even from the supplier that does have stuff wrong with them. So you want to make sure that that's all good. He's just using a light cleaner to clean the face of that off, which is okay to use. Use a soft towel. Don't use the greasy rag from under the bench that you found 2 days ago that you lost 3 months ago. So he's going to apply a thin bead of STP, that oil stuff around the O-ring. Notice how he's holding on to that seal. He's holding on to the inside of it. What he's got going on there is he's able to lube that O-ring up without having to change the position of the seal in his hand. So he's lessening the chance of getting contaminants on the face. We got a bunch of various diameter PVC, pieces of PVC pipe cut, and that's what we use to install them. The stationary seats. Go ahead and clean that off. Then you just want to push on it gently. Sometimes you have to kind of rock it a little bit to get that O-ring started in there. You never want to like get it on there and then start hitting it with the hammer if it's not going. If it's not going, you got something going on. So you want to pull that back plate back off, make sure you're all cleaned up. And after you pop it in there like he just did, you want to check that seal, make sure you didn't get anything on there from the PVC pipe or some of that oil didn't drip down and get on the face of that seal. That oil is pretty thick, so if you get any of that oil that we use on that face, it will leak when you go to air test it. It'll give you a leak. We wipe the excess glue that they use to hold those rotating elements together off of the bellows. That way you have a nice even seal on the sleeve. And again, you want to check the face of that, make sure there's nothing going on with it. Make sure there's no cuts or scrapes or gouges or anything like that. When he goes ahead and puts this on there, there's a couple of tabs on here. I'm pointing at that one right there. When you put this on and you want to shove that seal on all the way, you can take a couple screwdrivers and put them on those tabs and shove on that. That's pushing on everything that this thing has going on in it. If you just push on this big outside lip right here, that rubber is going to stretch and it's going to feel like your seal touched the face of your stationary seat. But what's happening is you're stretching that rubber, it's going, it's stopping, and then it's going to come back. So your seals won't even be touching. So you want to make sure you push on this part because that's pushing on the rubber, it's pushing on the seal, it's pushing on everything, and it'll give you that seal that you're looking for. So he's going to go ahead and put a thin coat on there. And then I always wipe a little bit on just the very edge of the sleeve, whatever's left over on my finger to kind of help it get over that sleeve. Yes, sir. I don't know the answer to that. Jordan? He's got a question you can answer. There.
So the question was it a type 2 mechanical seal with a type designation by the seal supplier? So John Grady said this one's most likely a type 2 rather than type 1. They just have to do with the geometry of it, so how it goes together. And most of the stuff seal face material as well. Since this is a solid handling pump, it's going to be a harder seal face material than what we would see in a water pump. So not knowing exactly what this pump is being built for, I don't know, but I would guess it's tungsten carbide or silicon carbide. It's really common combination.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. All right, so you can see how Jake's pushing on those tabs on there. He kind of went all the way around on there and made sure it wasn't moving anywhere. So it's pretty stiff, looked pretty good. I'll go ahead and install his run-dry hoses that we pre-cut. We built all those lines here, just push lock fittings. There's a little bit of lube to slide them on there. We throw the hose part in the oven to kind of get the rubber stretched. They slide on a lot easier. And then the plastic protectors on it's just for the painters down there so they don't paint the hoses all up. So we got our seal in, ready to tackle the process of putting the impeller on. I'm going to slide that onto the front bench there. Huh?
Put the key on so fast when I talk about the key for a second.
Oh yeah. So Mike's got the camera on the key here. See how that key goes into that notch on the sleeve? That's what you're looking for on this particular pump with that O-ring. That's what you're looking for there so it can spin that rotating element. So what he's doing right now is we're going to take a measurement from this part of the back plate to that part of the sleeve. We're going to figure out that depth. And then we're going to take the measurement from the hub of the impeller to the back vane. And we're going to do some subtraction and figure out how many shims we need to put into this to maintain our back vane clearance. We got 2.962. And he's using the thick end, not the thin end, so it's going to be a little bit construed. And 2.972. So you want this number to be smaller than that number, and you want it to be 30 thousandths. You want to get as close to 30 thousandths as you can. Yeah, whatever you think. Yeah, right? Yeah. Huh? That's all right, it'll go. Yeah.
That's right, right?
I don't know, I just know what they take. I just know what they take. I think I had those numbers backwards, Mr. Yoder, didn't I? I've done these for so long, I don't have to measure them anymore. I just know what they take. So you want this number over here to be smaller than this number here. So he's put 30 thousandths in there of shims. Those shims were 15 thousandths each. He put 2 in there. So that should get us right to our pretty close to our 30 thousandths. We do have a tolerance there. You can be plus or minus 8 thousandths, so you can go anywhere from as low as 22 thousandths to as high as 38 thousandths, but the closer you can get to 30, the better it'll be. Put it in dry and then we'll check it as shimming. We'll check the clearance. So he's going to put his lock screw in without any red Loctite on it for right now, just to tighten it up. And then we're going to use a taper gauge that's going to go between the back plate and the vane on the impeller. And that's going to we're just going to measure that to check our back vane clearance to make sure that our measurement and our math was right. These are our taper gauges. These have a series of numbers on them. They go from like 0 to 150 thousandths, I think. This particular pump is 30 thousandths. So we'll just slide that gauge in between the vane and the back plate. 42. Can pull one out.
Check all of them?
Yeah. So that first vane you checked, he was at 42 thousandths.
44.
Yeah, about 40, about the same. About the same. About 44. So we're gonna have to take that impeller back off and put a shim in it, or pull a shim out. That's why we didn't put red Loctite in there in case we had to pull it apart. So we're at 42 on the low one. Take 15 thousandths out. Put us at 27, which will be pretty close to 30, and we'll be right on. Put the red on there. Yeah. Got our red Loctite on this time. We'll go ahead and tighten that down and then recheck our shimming and make sure we're where we're supposed to be. We're right at 27. 27, 28. Oh. So that's properly shimmed. You want to make sure that that's where it's supposed to be, because if it's too wide or too close, if it's too close, your impeller can run into your back plate. If it's too wide, you're not going to get those properties that you need from the. I forgot to show you guys the knobs in there, that how that cyclo-seal system works, how it cleans out around the seal. Yes, sir.
What's the maximum difference you can have? We got 27 on one, 20 on the other one, 30 on the other one. Does that ever happen?
Yeah, that happens. He's asking what the tolerance is between, so we got 3 back vanes here, and he noticed that we measured one was like 27 and the other ones were 28. He's asking what that tolerance is there between that. You don't want them, I'd say probably more than 3 or 4 thousandths off. I don't know if there's an exact measurement there. You want, if it's way off, there's something wrong. Stop. Don't keep shimming out until it clears. Either the back vanes weren't properly machined, or you got worn out part, or your back plate's on crooked, or your bracket's on crooked. You want to check that out. So I wouldn't probably go more than 3 to 4. So what he's got here is just an air gauge we made up. We're going to run this up to about 7 to 9 pounds, and what we're doing is we're testing that seal and that lip seal. If you go too much more than that, you'll pop the seal out of the back plate. So he's right there, and that's holding air, so that means that seal was put in right. It's not leaking. It means that lip seal's good. So now we can move on with the other end of the pump and putting the vacuum pump on. We air test all of our run-dry pumps before they leave a bench or they go back to the lab. Just that way, if there's a problem with it, it's easier to fix now rather than putting the whole pump together, putting oil in it, they going back there at leaking, then we have to deal with all the oil draining all over the place and everything else. So that's something you guys can make up to test your seals before you guys put them back on your trailer units or wherever you guys are running them. So you don't have to test a seal on the unit and then have downtime pulling everything back apart. No, you can put it on last. You guys got any questions about any of that stuff we just did right there? Yes, sir.
There's a shiny spot on the front of the impeller. Is that where they balanced it, or did they just take a...
Yeah. So he's asking about the shiny spot. I don't know if you guys can see it over there, but I can just spin that real quick. So right there, that's where they balanced it. So they do all our balancing in that gray cloth deal right there. So they balance all of our impellers. So we just got a new machine to do like the really big ones, but all those are done outside right now. We're gonna be bringing all that stuff in, but most of these ones are all done here. So that's just where it's at. It's where they needed to balance it. They have a machine in there that calibrates all that. And there is a tolerance here, so if you get an impeller and you balance it yourself with a stand like an arbor and just kind of let it roll until the bottom, then that's where you need to balance it. If you go more than half of the shroud, or you see an impeller that's less than half the shroud thickness, that impeller is too thin and it's going to crack. So he's putting on right now is the Redi-Prime table. That's what our vacuum pump's going to mount up to. He asked if this was a vertical pump, if this bearing frame would be the same, and the answer to that question is yes, it would be. The only difference is on that shoulder that's inside there, there's some notches in it, and we're going to put a grease shield in there to hold the grease into those back bearings. So that frame can be used for a horizontal or a vertical pump. Like I was talking on our F16 frames where there's no shoulders in there and you can slide the shaft all the way through. There is a snap ring groove in there and you can put a snap ring in that, and then you can put your grease shield on that snap ring. So our F16 frames can also be used as vertical frames as well. Another question? Who did? Oh. Yeah, he's asking about how the vacuum pump is driven. And there's going to be a belt that we're going to hook from the vacuum pump down to the shaft. So this one's going to hook up to a diesel motor. So the diesel motor is essentially going to drive the vacuum pump, but it's going to be driving the whole pump. So he's got his key in there. We're going to go ahead and slide our bottom pulley on. So he's doing is he's lining up that bottom pulley with the top one. He's got his bolts holding the not tight, because we're going to have to shim that vacuum pump up for our belt tightness. So he's kind of adjusted that bottom one to where it's close. He's going to keep spinning that until that top belt lines up in the middle, or as close to the middle as he can get it. And then he'll go ahead and tighten that pulley on the shaft. Huh? Pull your vacuum pump forward. Okay. Oh. Why go as far as it'll go? Oh, I see. Very good. So he's pretty close to the middle there. He's going to go ahead and tighten that up. We use blue Loctite on those so they don't back out. What we use under our vacuum pumps is just an auto body, like fender shim, like shimming out fenders and stuff on cars. And we have 4 different sizes. We have 1/8 inch, 64th inch, 32nd of an inch, and 16th of an inch. And we just, depending on how tight we need to make the bell, is what we'll use for the shims. Looks like he's going to start with the 16th and the 32nd and then see where we are. When you're shimming these vacuum pumps up, you don't want the belt to be too tight. If it's too tight, what's going to happen is it's going to pull down on that bearing inside that vacuum pump. It's going to wear that bearing out. If it's too loose, you're going to get belt slap, and possibly skip, not operate your vacuum pump correctly. We'll tighten a couple bolts up and then see how the belt feels. It's pretty good. People ask how to tell how tight, if it's your belt's tight enough or not, and I say just treat it like a belt on a car. So you want it to move a little bit, but you don't want it to move so much that it's going to squeak, and you don't want it to be so tight that you can't possibly ever tighten it. You'll know if you got too much shims, because when you put your shims under there, this part will be off the back, and that means your belt's pulling that vacuum pump down. So you got to take some shims out. Is there any questions about that? You guys have any questions about that mechanical seal installation that we did? You guys want to see it again, or are you guys good, or? It's up to you guys. Okay. You want to redo it? You want us to pull it back out and do it again?
No, you already did. I mean, you're not doing it again.
Oh, okay. I got you. All right. So he's going to put his gasket on. We're going to get ready to put the volute on this thing. Yes, sir.
In the shaft and the sleeve, when you replace the mechanical seal, you must to change the lip also?
Change the sleeve?
Yes.
No, you don't have to. Just look at it, make sure it's not damaged or anything.
And what side will be external from the sleeve to the mechanical seal?
What's the tolerance?
Yes.
I'm not sure.
No.
Yeah.
So how we know that the sleeve is okay for replace only the mechanical seal?
That part of the sleeve should, in theory, never wear out. What he's asking me here is how he knows if he needs to replace the sleeve when he changes the mechanical seal. The part of the sleeve that seal holds onto should in theory never wear out because nothing's moving on that sleeve. So that sleeve should in theory be fine. If you are going to replace your mechanical seal, since you're already in there, I would pull the sleeve off and replace the O-ring in there. And one thing else you want to look for too is mushrooming. If you put that impeller on really tight, you can squish that sleeve. If it's really hard to pull the rotating element off, that would be a sign that somebody put the impeller on and drove it on there too hard and kind of expanded that sleeve, but your sleeve should be fine.
What was that adhesive spray you used for that paper gasket?
What did you put glue on there? The adhesive? What did you put on the gasket? Grease?
Oh, I put some grease to hold it on.
Oh, he just put some grease on the gasket just to kind of hold it on there so it won't fall off. Same grease we use in our bearings, just in a little mini grease gun.
This crane.
I know. Down a little more. Maybe. Yeah, you should be able to go on. Maybe a little bit more. There you go. Push up on it. Should go on. Yeah, should go on. No, it didn't go on. It should go. There you go. And after he gets his volute bolts tight here, again, you're going to want to spin it. These are going to be a little harder to spin because you're turning the vacuum pump too. But you just want to make sure you're not feeling any rubbing through or vibration through the shaft because it's rubbing on like a wear ring or something like that. You want to make sure it turns nice and smooth. These ones won't spin, and you can't spin these ones and then get them to come to a stop like the closed couple pump I showed you earlier because of the vacuum pump. And then I just go ahead and turn that sideways up on the bench or just stand. It should sit on there pretty good. And then just finish building it up here and then we'll put it on the floor. Watch your hammer. Leave a little bit of tension on it. Leave a little bit of tension on it. So you're gonna go ahead and install the oil reservoir. And then we'll hook the lines up.
Excuse me,
Yes, sir.
there's no wearing ring in the impeller?
There's one in the volute, but not on the impeller. Yeah.
In the volute.
Yeah. He was asking if there was a wearing in there, and yeah, the wearing's in the volute on these ones. He was asking if there's also one on the impeller. We do some pumps that have a double wearing where there's one in the volute and one on the impeller, but this one just takes one inside the casing of the volute. The lines coming out of the back plate on the when they go to the reservoir, they will go top to top and bottom to bottom. The oil there, what that's doing is that's help keeping that seal cool. So when we say a run dry system, it means you can run this pump X amount of time without without pumping anything before that seal burns up. Can you reach it? The oil we use is a Klondike oil. I believe the viscosity is 15 weight. Somebody can correct me if I'm wrong.
You also use glycol.
Huh?
Glycol you can use too.
Glycol?
Glycol.
Michael just said you can use something called glycol as well in there. Put a little bit more in that one. Yeah, a half full one. The oil reservoir has a minimum and maximum line on it. He's just under the maximum level. So that'll be all right. Those caps that he's putting on there is a vent in those. It just vents out of the cap through like the knobs of the cap. So it is a vented system. So that's the purpose of that lip seal in that back plate, is that's holding that oil in there. That's why that lip seal that's why we put that lip seal in there. If this wasn't a run dry pump, we of course wouldn't have the oil reservoir, the lines, or that lip seal back there. You just have a mechanical seal. We can just do it on the bench. Just do it from this side. I might lower this and just readjust that. Maybe just spin it on the back side here. We'll just leave this on the bench. There we go. Just to kind of hold it. It'll fall over, kill us. God forbid if we died. All right. So we used to run 2-inch hose on these, and then we went down to a 1-inch hose because people wanted to run valves so they could shut this off. So we had this weird piping. We had to turn this around, had all these elbows and everything, so we could get everything to line up because the 2-inch hose was really hard to flex. What are you looking for? It's up there. So we went down to a 1-inch Redi-Prime hose with a smaller valve, so we can run the hose straight instead of having to run it all the way out the back and loop it around and do funky stuff. So this is like kind of the updated version of running the valve. All our Redi-Primes get valves now. You guys got any questions about any of this? About anything that we did? Who's hollering? Again, we put plastic cover over this hose too, so the painters don't have to take the hose off. Just keeps paint off the hose. And then after he's done here, it'll go back to the test lab, and then they're going to pull a vacuum on this, make sure it holds vacuum, make sure there's no leaks on any of the stuff that we didn't test, which they're going to test the seal, it'll test all of it. They'll pull a vacuum on it, it'll hold vacuum for, I think they do it for 5 minutes. Holds what, like 23 or 22 inches. And then if it passes the test, it goes to paint, gets painted, gets skidded up, and then shipped to you guys. So. All right, you guys have any questions?